If there were any points of comment, clarification, or challenge that you wanted to put to Robin or me now, that would be fine. We won't be disappointed if you don't have any comments or questions, but if you do, then put your hand in the air, and I saw a hand here, and somebody will arrive with a microphone, because we need a microphone, otherwise we won't get the translation, which means that we know what you've just asked. I think there's a microphone coming, and well done, we've got one, it's here. And if there are any other questions, do please, or comments, do please put your hand up, and we'll make sure that you get a microphone.
Thank you very much for your presentations. It was very interesting. Well, I've got a question to Mr. Robin. And the question is how disciplinary measures affect members' activity, and is there a practice of removal, withdrawal of disciplinary measures? Would the disciplinary actions negatively affect the activities of the member or the business? Thank you.
The question there is asking for a little more clarification of how discipline works and how that impacts the members who are disciplined. And Robin doesn't actually discipline people himself, but I'm sure he would like to comment on that.
Well, other than Robert, of course, when he can't keep to his budget. It's a really good question, because when you, whatever disciplinary process a member might face, it takes some time. And during that period, whether it's a small offence or whether it's potentially a big offence, during that period, the member is under a lot of pressure, because they're trying to run their business and they're facing the uncertainty and the intrusiveness of a disciplinary process. One of the things that I encourage our disciplinary team to do, and I can only encourage them, I can't tell them, is to take a very early view on whether a complaint against a member is a serious complaint or not. Because often you get complaints that really are about nothing. And particularly, I think, in some disciplines like insolvency, the complaint rate is quite high, because people have usually lost money and they're very emotional about that. So one of the things that we do for all members who face discipline is we offer them, from my side of the organisation, a support member. So a member who has volunteered and who will stand by them, if necessary, throughout the process, to really to help advise them. Not to help defend them, because that, if anything, is the lawyer's job, if there is a lawyer involved, but certainly to advise them and to act as an outlet for their frustration. But I think the issue, of course, is that these processes, and if they are serious in particular, these processes can take some time, and therefore there is quite a lot of disruption to people's lives, even if at the end of the day they're not found to be guilty.
Robin, thank you very much for that answer, and thank you for the question, because it really does strike at the heart of what it means to be a membership organisation with a strong reputation, because the public expect that their complaints will be taken seriously, but we also have to make sure that we follow proper judicial process and support our members at the same time. So learning how to manage that process over many years and both maintain the confidence of our members in the processes that we will put them through, and also the confidence of the public is a really demanding job, especially for a private organisation. This is not a government or judicial organisation doing this. This is a private body. So thank you for the question. maybe there's other questions people like to ask, and if that illustrates just how we can get into some important issues, I welcome the questions and comments. So.
Arman Tuliev.
Arman Tuliev from Kazakhstan. Well, my question is, of course, we are very impressed about your support that you provide for your members. It's very pleasant to know. But I'm just wondering, one of your main objectives is the public benefit of to the society, not for your members. So my question is how the society, the general society, public benefit is represented in your institute. So who represents in your institute, for example, users of the accounts, or maybe government authorities, or maybe there are some independent directors on your board? If you could tell us in more detail about this.
We'll factor these points into our presentations next time because they're very important points. I'll make some comments, and I think Robin will probably make some even better comments because I'll have more time to think of the response. First of all, I think that your observation that there's a tension here between the interests of members and the public interest is right at the heart of what we're trying to manage. So it's a very relevant challenge. But I don't think that they are in opposition. Actually, a well-supported, competent membership serves a wider public interest and enables the public and business to have the services of competent professionals. But on the very specific point that you make about how do we ensure that the public interest is seen to be represented, I've got two sorts of answers to that. First of all, ever since we were established, we have oversight mechanisms from government. Originally, it's the body that grants us a royal charter. So there's an outfit called the Privy Council, which sounds very old and traditional, but that body has always been there and ultimately has the right to withdraw our charter or to impose conditions on us because we're not seen as acting in the public interest. But more directly, we have oversight from the Financial Reporting Council in the UK, which is the regulator, the combined regulator of corporate governance and reporting, including auditing, and that oversight body, which inspects us as a training body and also as an authoriser of auditors. They inspect us and report to Parliament on our activities. And then the public can at any point make complaints about us or challenges in public. When we talk about having a public interest obligation, we do this in the spirit not of saying, so whatever we do is in the public interest. We say, this is a standard to which you can hold us to account. And if you see us saying anything, writing anything, lobbying for anything which you think is not in the public interest, then you have the right to challenge us, wherever you want to do that. So those are some of the mechanisms which are available, but it's absolutely crucial to our maintaining public trust that we don't just say, trust us, we're looking after the way we run our organisation so that it acts in the public interest.
I think the only thing I would add to that is that we are very, very clear, and we're clear with members, that if there is a conflict between the public interest and the members' interest, then it's the public interest that comes first. And that is what is required by our Royal Charter. And, you know, sometimes our members aren't too happy with that. But at the end of the day, we will have the argument with them. And they usually actually understand why at the end of it. But that is one of those things that I mean, it is a really, really good question because it is one of those tensions that we do have to manage.
One final point to make is that the diversity of what our members do also helps, because it's often members who discipline and moderate what we say because they see particular groups of people. So you referred to the interests of preparers of accounts and users of accounts. Our members are preparers and users of accounts and investors. They're also in the regulatory community and the academic community. So the very diversity of our membership means that we eliminate a lot of the potential accusations that, well, you're saying that because auditors would think that. Well, most of our members are not auditors. Or people say, well, you would think that because you represent people in business. Well, a lot of our members are not in business and do not see us as a business lobby. They expect us to represent a wide variety of views. So there's a lot of discipline within the membership to make sure that we do the right thing. So, great questions. We could even be overrunning into coffee, but it'd be well worth it. If there's a question, I suspect this might be delivered in English.
It is indeed, and it's short. It's a request for some more information. I was interested in your comments on the ethical helpline, and what I'd like to know is how often is that actually used? How many cases do you have?
That's a really good question. I can't give you an exact number of cases, but we have 4 or 5 members of staff who permanently man those helplines, and they are always busy. So it's if that gives you a sort of measure. I think the other just important point to make there, and again this is a sort of point about regulation. One of the requirements of all chartered accountants is that if they come across some example of wrongdoing by another member, they have a professional duty to report that to the Institute, except for those members of staff who are mainly chartered accountants anyway, those members of staff who man the ethical helplines and support members. So those two groups are excused that duty to report so that they can maintain that confidentiality and support for members who need the help.
Thank you. Is there time for another question before we go to the break? Yes, I see a question over here, which might also be in English. I'd just start speaking into it. I'm sure it'll be fine.
My name is Sylvia. I'm one of the directors at IFAC. Robin, you made reference to the fact that at ICAEW, there's sort of this open membership concept. And actually, that's quite a new concept for, I think, a lot of countries who are around the table. But I do know that the education standards are moving that direction. I wonder if you could actually just share some perspectives of what are the successful elements for that type of concept. For most of us here, we're very accustomed to a feature where you have to have certain education qualifications and set certain experience, but maybe just sort of the principles and the elements that made that very successful.
Okay. Well, no, thank you for that, Sylvia. I was just conferring with Robert because I couldn't remember what he read at university for his degree. I'm pleased to say it wasn't accounting and finance, because that makes 2 of us. Robert read philosophy, politics, and economics. I read geography, both of which are eminently suitable degrees for becoming chartered accountants. And I guess the real point is that when you are looking for the skills and the talent that make good chartered accountants, there is a need for a degree of numeracy. But there is not a need for us all to be absolute mathematical experts. What what the range of different backgrounds brings is that diversity of view and opinion. And I think certainly I don't think this has changed, but the views of the major recruiters of graduates or trainee accountants have always said, in the UK, said that they, first of all, they search out that diversity. And secondly, they've actually said that quite often those who were without a relevant degree, without an accounting or finance degree, actually were more successful in passing their exams, possibly because they didn't think they knew it all already. But I think what we're really looking for when you're recruiting, what you're really looking for is that questioning mind. And part of the reason that historians, for example, make good chartered accountants is because when they study for their degree, when they start exploring history, what they're trying to identify is actually what happened. Not what the story of the day, not what the press of the day or the government of the day said happened, or even worse, the government of the day 20 years later or 50 years later said happened. If you think about it, every piece of news is spun in one way or another. It's very rare that you get a completely objective viewpoint. And of course, what we're looking for when you're making those judgments is trying to search out the real essence of whatever the argument or the problem is. So those sorts of skills of research and an inquiring mind, together with a good level of numeracy, are actually what makes a good chartered accountant. And it seems daft to us, and I think it always has seemed daft to us, that you should narrow your talent pool unnecessarily at the beginning. What we do is put that barrier at the end of the examination process. It comes back to those three things. If you are good enough, smart enough to pass all of the examinations, if you have the work experience, and if your sponsoring member or your sponsoring individual says that you are a fit person to be a chartered accountant, then that is what matters rather than your distinct background.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of observations I'd add to that. Although there's diversity of degree, there's the important point that we actually now have no educational pre-qualifications for embarking upon our training, which is very radical, but the membership itself is very happy with that because ultimately you don't get into membership unless you can pass the final qualifying case study examination. And the emphasis is placed instead on employers, because if people are prepared to employ people who they think can get through the exams, then you can become a chartered accountant. And so what's very important is the relationship between employers of students for our qualifications and the students themselves. It's a different dynamic. We absolutely understand as we go around the world that this is not a model which you can transfer easily. And so it's one of those things, as I was saying at the beginning, we have points of view and experience which are meant to be challenges. We're not saying that the whole world should work like this, because we absolutely understand that there are long traditions and proud professions with a completely different experience. But it is an interesting point of contrast to say, why is it, if we are very concerned about quality, that this body with a very high reputation for quality doesn't seem to have some of the same preconditions we have? So it's offered as a challenge, an interesting thing to think about, and it's particularly relevant as we go around the world, not because we're saying, here's our model, adopt it, but in many countries of the world, people are looking to be as inclusive as possible. And if we can say, well, think about how you can make the profession inclusive and open to talent, bear in mind our experience. So it's not a recipe for everyone, but it's an interesting challenge to think about how a profession might be developed in particular countries.